WHMIS symbols. Now I'm sure that some of you know what some or maybe all of these are. Let's start with this one up here. Can somebody tell me what that symbol is called or what it means? Let's see. Somebody knows what it means. Isaac, you're looking right at me. You can tell me.
Corrosive.
It means corrosive. So that is the word that we would use to describe it. And the picture is really quite apt here. It's going to burn you. So if something corrosive gets on you or something else, it's going to eat away at the layer of tissue or skin or whatever is there. I'll give you an example. When I was in organic chem in university, my lab partner and I did something wrong. Our distillation apparatus blew up all over us. And we had to change our clothes. So she went home, put her pants in the washing machine or whatever, and when they came out, they were black cords. They were just little shredded pieces of black cord. So what we spilled on us was corrosive. If you spill something that is corrosive on you in the lab, you need to tell me immediately so that we can make sure that we've taken the correct precautions to make sure that what happened to my friend's pants doesn't happen to, let's say, your face. Now this one here, oh, that was a fun twist. This one here in the middle is one that often causes people trouble. Does someone want to tell me perhaps what that one is called? I'll tell you. Okay, go ahead.
Radioactive.
Oh, and what's funny is I was going to say that word, but I was going to say, I'll tell you what it's not called. And radioactive is the very, very common, so don't feel bad, it's the very, very common incorrect answer for what that symbol means. You see the R, you know that radioactive is bad. That's what lots of people assume as soon as they see this symbol. I can see, you give your hand up. It means reactive, and I'd like to add the word dangerously here, or very, but it means reactive. That's what the R is for. It doesn't necessarily mean radioactive. Radioactive is its own whole category. So here, the R means dangerously reactive. That means that it will be very easy for this substance to enter into a chemical reaction. I heard a few people say the name of this symbol, so I'm guessing that someone will be able to tell me. Can someone tell me what the name of that one there is? Carter. Compressed gas. Now, to give you a relationship to something that you might have experienced, a lot of the time a compressed gas is something that could explode. If you're looking at symbols on things that you have at your house, things like a can of aerosol hairspray would have the explosive symbol on it, and that's because there's a gas that's compressed inside the container. It doesn't mean the exact same thing as explosive, but that's to give you sort of a parallel for it. Now, let's talk about this symbol, keeping in mind that there are two that look an awful lot alike. The first one, so the one that's in the middle row, looks like some burning flames with the letter O in it. The one on the bottom row is just some burning flames. Does anyone want to tell me what the difference between those two symbols is? Or even what one of them is called? You don't have to know what they both are. Let your hand up. Okay, go ahead.
Is oxidizing.
So the one with the O, right here, is called oxidizing. The one without the O, that's just the burning flame, this is the one that is called flammable and or combustible. Now they both have a flame on it, insinuating that some kind of burning might be happening. Oxidizing is just a specific category of chemical reactions that's not exactly the same as plain old burning. A reaction where something is flammable or combustible means that in the presence of oxygen, usually something catches on fire. Oxidizing has a more general meaning. It has to do with electrons being taken away from substances. Both of them are bad, both of them are dangerous, but oxidizing is just a really specific set of reactions that could cause potentially fire, whereas flammable and combustible, that thing about like I lit something on fire with a match. that's flammable combustible. The next two are these two, and they again have something in common. They both indicate to me that something is poisonous or toxic. So they both mean bad. Does anybody know what the difference between those two symbols is? Yes, Dora. The one with the skull could cause death, that's definitely for sure. The one with the T could cause death as well. And so we would be looking for a little more detail about maybe when the death might occur. So I think you're on the right track.
One with the skull is just a lot more severe.
It's more severe, and she said it caused death. He said it's more severe. Does anyone have a description maybe that has to do with time that they might want to add to this? Because you're both right. That's what we're looking for here. The one with the skull and crossbones that Dora said could cause death, that Dora said is more serious. This is the one with the immediate effect. So it's poisonous, it's toxic, whichever word you want to use. The one with the skull and crossbones is immediate. So that's why people generally say it's more serious, because you see it right away. It can make you really sick, sick enough that you could die almost immediately. The one with the T also means toxic, but usually we would say this has other effects, or its effects are more long-term, they take a long time. Something to indicate to me that it's not going to happen right away. So for example, asbestos that they used to use in insulation, if over a long period of time you're exposed to that, then you could get, for example, lung cancer, but it probably won't happen after one exposure 5 minutes. We have one symbol left. Does anyone know what that symbol is called? Yes. Biohazardous. Now this is the symbol that would go on any sort of container that has some sort of living specimen in it. Since we do not generally deal with things that are still alive in our labs at school, you wouldn't see this generally. This is the kind of symbol that when the nurse comes to give you your shots, the yellow container that she puts the needles in afterwards would have that symbol on it. And now those are the WHMIS symbols that you need to be aware of, because this is the safety system that we use in the lab. Because we're starting out with chemistry, we're going to need to know these symbols right from the get-go. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask about WHMIS symbols? So I walked around and looked at what a lot of people were writing, and a lot of you have really good suggestions for most important lab safety rules. And on a bunch of people's paper, I was walking around with my gold stars. They're not all gold stars, some of them are tigers and frogs and stuff. But I was putting them on a particular thing that you had written down. And you didn't all write it with the exact same words, but if I had to give you one lab rule that everybody has to follow, otherwise nothing will go well, it is that you need to follow all the instructions carefully. So a lot of you had read the instructions, listen to the teacher, something that indicated that you were going to look at me, make sure you knew what you were supposed to do because I told you or because we read it together, and that you were going to follow through on that. If I ever asked you what is the most important lab safety rule, that is the one. Because that rule kind of encompasses all of the other rules. Now I saw people with lots of other really, really good suggestions for lab rules on their sheets. For example, I noticed a lot of you, almost everybody in fact, told me something about protective equipment. And by that, I mean lab aprons, lab goggles, gloves if we're touching something that you need gloves for. Anything that would be equipment that you need to put on to protect yourself. In the workplace, it's called PPE, personal protective equipment. If you put anything like that on your sheet, that is a really important lab rule to follow. Now, those were two that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned because if they weren't on your list, they really should be. Now I would like some suggestions for other things that would make the lab safe, because you guys all have really good things on your list. Who would like to tell me something? I'm going to pick something. How about Gianna? Why don't you tell me what are the things on your list? I saw a lot of versions of no fooling around, no horseplay, no messing around, no running around. The idea that we should be calm in the lab. We should walk slowly. We should be careful. And so if you have something to that effect on your list, that is really important. Anybody else have something that they would like to add? Yes. So let's talk about tying back hair, and I'm going to put loose clothing in the same line. Anytime we're doing a lab, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you ahead of time, if you have long hair, you have to tie it back. If you are wearing loose clothing, like a baggy hoodie or really flowy something, you can't wear it during the lab. And the reason is simple. Stuff like that knocks things over really easily, catches on fire really easily, and I wouldn't want your clothes or your hair to be burned. Anybody else have something they'd like to add to this list? Yes.
No, the symbols, what is your...
So, I'm going to put the word safety, and I'm going to put WHMIS right there. You need to know, before you start working with something, what kind of safety precautions do you need to take. So when he says know the symbols, that means if you're going to work with something corrosive, you need to know that ahead of time so that if some of it got spilled, well then you would know what to do in response to that. So you need to be aware of what kind of substances you're dealing with so that you know what kind of safety precautions you would need to take. Now, those I think are 5 really, really good lab rules that you need to follow. I'm going to add a couple more minor details, but they're things that are important. Thing number 6, and this is an absolute must, you absolutely cannot bring food and consume it in the lab. That doesn't mean that in your bag you can't have your lunch bag in there, that's fine. But you're never, ever, ever, ever supposed to eat in the lab, and that's because heaven knows what has touched those lab benches. Even if I clean them, would you really want to put your muffin on the same place where partially dissected fetal pig was sitting moments earlier? I wouldn't. And I'm the one who cleans up in there sometimes, and I still don't. The other thing that I would like to mention in terms of lab safety is that even if you follow all of these precautions, accidents happen. And the key thing is you have to inform me, your teacher, immediately if something goes wrong. Usually my response would be more careful next time, here's how you clean it up. Sometimes my response might be, oh my gosh, let's stop you from being on fire, or perhaps let's rinse that acid out of your eyes. But usually, I need to know just so that I know that it's happening, not because you're going to be in some serious trouble, because the world is going to end, but on the off chance that it's more serious than you think, you need to let me know what is happening. Does anyone want to ask any questions about lab rules? Any other details of lab rules, I think I would say fall under the follow all of the instructions category. Sometimes there'll be specific instructions about how to dispose of a substance or how to handle a substance, specific instructions on how to smell or look at a substance, but we'll leave those for particular spots where they're actually going to